Good morning. So I call on the Board of Selectmen to order. Good morning. I don't think this is, oh, it might be working. Anyway, my name is Brian Burke. I'm chair of the Stow Board of Selectmen. And on behalf of all the boards, all our departments, and all the residents of Stow, welcome to Stow, to the Mass Municipal Association, the legislators, and other distinguished guests. And where appropriate, Lashana Tava. Now, one of the things about being in a small town is you're very proud of its history and its points of interest, some of which are being shown here on this slideshow. We have a great deal of history in Stow and a great deal of things going on today. For example, the Massachusetts Firefighting Academy, where every firefighter in Massachusetts gets trained, is here in Stow, right across from Lake Boone. Lake Boone, back 100 years ago, before automobiles, was a vacation destination for many Bostonians who would come out here on a railroad that went right up to the lake's edge, where there was a grand hotel and a ferry landing. In colonial times, Lake Boone was the site of two of the earliest English settler casualties in the Eastern Theater of the King Philip's War. And in Revolutionary times, we were the home of the Patriots' Treasury. After the Crown abrogated the Massachusetts Charter, Massachusetts Patriots directed all their towns and cities to send their tax revenues here to Stow, to the first Revolutionary War treasurer, Sidney Gardner, who was also the first treasurer of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. In fact, you can see the Gardner home if you're going east on Route 117. It's right down Red Acre Road, where George P. Shultz, the former United States Treasurer and Secretary of State under Ronald Reagan, lived in the 60s and was one of my predecessors on the Board of Selectmen. And if that's not interesting enough, Stow is the birthplace of butternut squash. Now, present day, we have a lot of interesting points of interest. We've got 4 golf courses, 3 of them open to the public, 3 airfields, one of them which deals with ultralights, a number of farms, a number of where you can get fresh produce, and of course we're known for our pick-your-own orchards, where thousands of families come each fall in order to pick apples at one of these orchards. But what is lesser known is that you can come here in the summer and pick peaches, blueberries, and pears. And of course, we have the world-renowned Collings Foundation and its collection of vintage automobiles and aircrafts. You can go on the Collings Foundation website and find out their list of military reenactments, air shows, and other events that they hold here on their grounds in Stow. But most recently, one of the things that we're most proud about is this building that we're all meeting in here today. This is almost singular repurposing of an elementary school and then a consolidation of that structure with a fire department, a community center, senior activities, and various other matters. Very other municipal entities, and we still have room for growth here. So at the end of this meeting, if you'd like, we have members of the fire department or members of the representatives of the municipality who would be, including me, would be happy to take you on a tour of this facility. So even if you don't choose to take the tour, we'd love you to stay in Stow here today as long as you like. On your tables, you'll find some handout and flyers about some of the fine restaurants and the pick-your-own orchards here in Stow. The Emma's Cafe has provided the breakfast that you're having today, and the Nancy's Airfield Cafe is known as a gourmet brunch and dinner place. Honeypot Hill Orchards has provided us with some of the apples, or all the apples that you see up there. And if you go there, don't forget the cider donuts. And it also has, and this is interesting, the biggest box hedge maze in North America. So you could take a look at that. Bottom line, you're welcome here in Stow today as long as you like, but you're welcome back anytime. Please, feel free to come to Stow where you're always welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay, great. My name is Victoria Sclafan, and I'm a legislative analyst at the MMA. I've been with the MMA for over 4 years now, and I work most closely on our issues related to the environment, transportation, and energy. But we'll be talking a little bit about all sorts of issues today. I officially wanted to say happy fall to everyone because it is the first day of fall, so we're officially in the season now, and I thought what better place to be on the first day of fall than Stow with all of their orchards and other fall activities. I actually was here apple picking 2 weeks ago, and it was great. So once again, thank you very much to the town of Stow for acting as our host today. This is a great building to hold a breakfast in. And also thank you to all of you who attended, especially our legislators who we'll be hearing from later on. We love these legislative breakfast meetings at the MMA because it gives us a chance to get out on the road and speak with all of you and see your communities. So they're some of our favorite events that we put on. In terms of the agenda today, this is a casual meeting, so I do want to have a lot of time for discussion between all of you and your legislators. Feel free to get up and grab another cup of coffee or some breakfast. We have plenty. I'm going to start off with a brief legislative update, and then we're going to hear from our legislators, and then we are going to have some discussion and wrap up by 10 o'clock. I do like to start out the meetings by going around the room and doing introductions, so if we could do that really quickly, I think that would be great, just so everyone has an idea of who is in the room. I also just wanted to mention that this meeting is being recorded for the Stow TV station and to go up on YouTube, I believe. So this is being recorded now at the beginning, and I think that some of the legislator comments will also be recorded as well. So just wanted to make sure everyone's aware of that. So I wanted to start off talking a little bit about the context of what's going on now, and I'll start off with the state budget. It's shaping up to be a really busy fall for those of us in the MMA legislative division. The legislature is holding many public hearings on various bills, and they're working up their agenda. The first year of the 2-year legislative session is going to be wrapping up formal sessions on November 15th. So there's a few more months kind of in this part of the session to work on bills. And as it usually is with the MMA, there's a lot of bills that we're supportive of and would like to see move forward. And then there's also a couple bills that we have concerns about and would like to see held back. In terms of the budget writers in the House and the Senate and the governor's office are making decisions about fiscal year 2018 as it unfolds, and we're already starting to think about fiscal year 2019. And I wanted to talk a little bit about state finances because I think that we're all a little bit anxious about state finances at the moment. So right now, we're 8 years into an economic expansion following the recession in 2008, and that is a long expansion by historical standards. So I do wish that I could stand here today and say that tax collections are very strong, but unfortunately that's not the case at the moment, as many of you know. And that's a little bit worrying for those of you in local government that are thinking about your budgets. For the past year or so, there's sort of been a pattern with the state budget where the budget has been made based on optimistic revenue projections, and then changes have had to be made as revenue projections haven't always been as were expected. So I wanted to tell you a little bit first about fiscal year 2017. That's the last fiscal year. We're still looking at that as that year is being closed out right now. State tax collections, the preliminary kind of estimates show, only grew by 1.4% last year. So that was kind of surprisingly slow growth for a time of economic expansion. There was some good news though, and that is that lottery revenues beat the forecast for this year by about 45 million. Lottery revenues help pay for municipal aid, so that's always a good sign for us. And in balancing the fiscal year 17 budget, the governor and our legislators spared the main municipal and school aid accounts, unrestricted general government aid, and Chapter 70. And that's something that we truly appreciate. Our cities and towns, as you know, that's extremely important to them, and we appreciate that local aid was held harmless in these cuts. Talking a little bit about the fiscal year 2018 budget. In July, Governor Baker signed the fiscal year 2018 budget totaling $39.4 million. That was kind of reduced due to reduced revenues. About $400 million was cut from the proposed budget, and the House and Senate also worked around that. So the final budget protected $1.6 billion in funding for the main municipal aid account, an increase of $40 million in unrestricted general government aid, as had been recommended in January by the governor and in the House and Senate in their budget bills. And those cherry sheets for local aid were posted by the Division of Local Services, as you all know, on July 1st. Chapter 70 in the budget includes $4.75 billion to cover the basic provisions of Chapter 70. It also continued to implement some of the provisions of the Foundation Budget Review Commission. The foundation budget funding, by adding more weight to employee benefits and taking that into account. There's a few other accounts that I know that municipal officials are always really interested in, and that is the special education circuit breaker, charter school reimbursement, regional school transportation. And I don't want to get too into it right now because I know that you all probably see our website and read our stories, but those are all accounts that, as you know, municipal officials are always thinking about and are very important to our cities and towns. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Masshealth in the budget. The governor did veto sections of the budget related to the state's Masshealth program. That was about $200 million. When Governor Baker signed the budget, he vetoed $320 million in spending, including those Masshealth numbers. This past week or so, the House decided to take up those veto overrides. They restored $275 million in the budget that had been vetoed. That included that spending for Masshealth. It was about 62 overrides totaling $275 million. In addition to the Masshealth funding, there were also a number of kind of statewide programs. A lot of them had to do with sort of the health and human services sector. So if you're interested in those, I can tell you more, or I'm sure your legislators can as well. So as for fiscal year 2018, the year that we're in now, we're watching state tax revenues. At the end of August, they grew by 1.9%. Compared to last year. September is going to be an important month to be taking a look at as we think about the budget for this year. So we'll be watching that closely. And then fiscal year 2019. It's hard to believe, but that's not too far away that we have to be thinking about that fiscal year. In December, the consensus revenue hearing will be held to kind of start thinking about state tax collections and what those estimates could look like. MMA is going to be speaking to House and Senate leaders, making sure that our budget priorities are known. And then the governor's budget recommendations are usually due just a few days after our MMA annual meeting in January. And oftentimes the governor will come to our annual meeting and he'll highlight a few of his priorities so we get to see an idea of what he might propose in his budget. So I know that was really quick, but I just wanted to give an update on budgetary issues. Moving on, another issue that's not necessarily budget, but capital spending is Chapter 90. And the construction season this year is starting to come to a close. We're already thinking about next year. As we have in the past, the MMA will be asking the governor to file a $300 million multi-year Chapter 90 bond bill. In early January, we're going to be asking legislators to take that bill up as soon as possible so that communities can have those funds out by April 1st. And as you all know, we've advocated for this for several years so that cities and towns can start to meet that need. Now that I've told you about a couple of finance issues, I'll move into a little bit of an update on legislative issues, regulatory issues, other things that the MMA is working on. Probably the issue that we've heard the most about over the past, I'd say, year is the issue of marijuana, following the passage of the ballot question on the 2016 ballot that legalized recreational marijuana use in Massachusetts. So this is probably something that we get the questions the most about from local officials saying, how are we going to regulate this in our communities? And I know that it's going to be an important issue. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about what happened in the legislature and how the regulatory structure is moving forward. Over the summer, the legislature had a bill that came out of conference committee making some rewrites to some parts of that law, and the governor signed it, I believe, in August. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about the local control pieces in that bill. As you may know, the bill sets up a somewhat unusual system that's kind of a two-tiered system if communities want to opt out, meaning they want to ban businesses that sell, grow, manufacture, or test recreational marijuana products. And it is going to depend on how your community voted on the 2016 ballot question. So if your community rejected the ballot question, you may ban recreational marijuana businesses through the standard ordinance or bylaw process, and you can do this until December 31st, 2019. So that process will apply to 91 communities, about a quarter of communities in Massachusetts where the question did not pass. Now, if your community did pass the question, it's a different process for you. Municipal government must prepare an ordinance or bylaw that must be reviewed by your municipal council. Following this review, the question, by vote of the Board of Selectmen or by the City or Town Council with approval of the mayor, must be placed on the ballot at a regular or special municipal election. The new law does provide that ballot question language, which I think is going to be really helpful to a lot of communities, so you don't have to kind of worry about if the language is correct or not. You just look right in the legislation. And now after that date, December 31st, 2019, that process is going to apply to all communities. So the MMA has been doing some work on tracking what communities are doing on this issue right now. And according to our records, we have about 30 communities have already voted to ban recreational marijuana businesses. Most of them, not surprisingly, are in communities where the ballot question failed. About 80 communities have taken another step. They've enacted a moratorium. This will give the communities some time to deal with this issue, kind of take the pulse of residents, see what the state's doing on it. So that's something that a lot of communities are doing. Before I go any further, I did want to mention, so in your packets, you have a fact sheet that's all about recreational marijuana and the changes to the law. So I think that will be really helpful if you can't remember anything I say or if you have other questions. And I also just want to say that I think that town council is going to be useful to a lot of communities as they move along with this process. I'm not a lawyer personally, and MMA is providing information, but in terms of what's best for your community, I think that a lot of communities are finding that might be a helpful step for them. So the new law also made some changes to the tax rate. In November, the ballot question, I should say, set the state tax rate at 10% plus a local option tax of up to 2% for a maximum of 12%. The new law increased the marijuana excise to 10.75% and increased the local option tax cap to 3% for a total of 20%. The new law also created a little bit of a different structure for communities entering into host community agreements. They have to be renegotiated every 5 years, and it limits what communities can do for community impact fees. So that's something that there's more information on in that sheet. Just a little bit about the regulatory structure. The bill made some changes to that. The main regulatory body for this new industry is called the Cannabis Control Commission. It's going to be a 5-member commission that has direct oversight over the industry, both medical and recreational marijuana. So 5 commissioners have been appointed by the governor, attorney general, and treasurer. Senator Jen Flanagan, you may have heard, has been recruited to be a commissioner on that Cannabis Control Commission. The chair is going to be Steve Hoffman. So they're getting started on their work. There is also a Cannabis Advisory Board that has 25 members, including a seat for the MMA that's going to make recommendations to the commission. And municipal officials are going to be very well served on that because our member on that commission is Auburn Town Manager Julie Jacobson, who really knows a lot about this issue and has participated with the MMA on that. So we'll continue to keep you updated as this goes along. All right, just a few more things I wanted to mention. I think that we're hearing a lot about healthcare, both at the state level and of course at the federal level as well. The Senate has been looking into legislation relative to healthcare cost containment, and they've been kind of having roundtable discussions and working groups looking across the country at how states are trying to grapple with ballooning healthcare costs. So the MMA participated in one of those roundtable discussions. We discussed a little bit the issue of EMS rates and ambulance fees. Another kind of piece of healthcare legislation and regulatory structure that we're thinking about is called Mobile Integrated Health, which uses existing ambulance services to provide pre- and post-hospital in-home care to patients. The goal would be to avoid unnecessary trips to the hospital and to cut costs by doing that while providing those services to patients. So that's something that the Department of Public Health is developing regulations on right now, and it's something that I think local officials are open to and want to hear a little bit more about. All right, 2 more things that are just kind of things I wanted to throw out there in case you have questions or comments on them. One is the public records law that passed last year. You'll remember that MMA talked a lot about this bill at the time when it came out, and we had concerns about the cost and the burden for municipal officials. And I want to hear from you, kind of, how is this working out for you? Are you facing issues with the new law? Is it working for you? Are there kind of tweaks that could be made that would be helpful to municipal officials? We have heard about one pretty extreme example in one community with them experiencing what they felt was harassment by one individual who filed over 200 public records requests targeting specific employees. This town appealed to the supervisor of public records to try to get that burden relieved because they felt that this incident was harassment, and the town's request was not granted in this case. They got a 5-day extension to meet all of these requests. Not all 200 were at once, but over a period of time. So the town was granted a 5-day extension, but they were not relieved of their burden to do this, of their obligation to do this, I should say. And I guess that this incident has sort of made us curious. Are other towns experiencing this sort of issue that you might think is harassment? So I'd like to hear about your experiences with that, both negative and positive. Last week at our legislative breakfast, we had a town clerk who was telling us about kind of the town's new system for dealing with this, and I think it was kind of helpful as a best practice. So if you have something like that, we're happy to hear that as well. All right, last issue I wanted to mention is something that I've been working on more and more, and it's something that I think the MMA is interested in, and that's the issue of climate change. About a year ago, Governor Baker signed an executive order establishing an integrated climate change strategy for the Commonwealth, trying to bring together stakeholders and aim for collaboration between state and local government to develop resiliency and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The state has since rolled out its municipal vulnerability preparedness program, which will provide grants to cities and towns that want to take part in a process to assess their vulnerabilities to climate change. Last year at the MMA meeting, we had a forum. Keith Bergman was our moderator for that. And this year, we're hoping to bring 2 workshops to local officials to learn a little bit more about the issue and think about some tools related to climate change. So if there's something that your town is doing on this issue, or if there's resources that would be valuable to you, I just wanted to get everyone thinking about it, and if it's something that you're interested in, feel free to email me or speak up. All right. I don't want to speak too long, so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our guests from the legislature who have joined us. We'd love to hear from all of you kind of about what you've been working on and what your priorities are for the coming session, and then we'll open it up for some discussion. All right. Representative, would you like to start us off, or Senator Eldridge?
Should we just speak from our table, or do you want us to come up?
You can do whatever you would like. Would you like to speak from here?
I'll just stand here. So Victoria, thank you so much for the presentation, and I think
We take recordings.
that's all.
Yes.
Thanks, Don. Thank you, Don. I knew Don would give us the answer. So Victoria, thank you so much for the presentation on a number of the issues going on Beacon Hill, and I think as legislators we agree that the best part of these breakfasts is responding to specific questions. So I'll be brief, but in addition to what Victoria highlighted, I just wanted to talk about a few things. One is that, and some of these were mentioned by Victoria, but on the short-term rentals, so I chair the Financial Services Committee, and it looks like that's one of the main committees that will be handling the short-term rental legislation, because half the bills went to that committee. So one of the things that I know that we're discussing in terms of short-term rentals, Airbnb, et cetera, is what should cities and towns be able to tax? In other words, keep as a local tax. What should that amount be in terms of the tax rate? And also, there's differing opinions about whether some of that money should go for the purpose of affordable housing with each town or city, or just up to the discretion of the city or town. So there's different bills that do different things on that front. And obviously, the last piece is what level of regulation should a town or city be able to prescribe on the conditions or the ability for homeowners or business owners to, if they own a number of residences, to provide the residences for use by Airbnb and other short-term rental organizations. So I'd love to hear feedback on that. On the transportation front, is that just sort of from a local perspective, with the district that represents both the Fitchburg and Worcester commuter lines, continue to push for more commuter rail parking, and I know that's especially an issue in this area for Stow, Maynard, Acton residents, is really continue to push for more commuter rail parking at the South Acton train station, but we're also pushing at Littleton and Ayer, because I'm proud of the work that the legislative delegation did to upgrade the Fitchburg commuter line, but obviously we still don't have enough parking, sort of a victim of its own success, so pushing for more parking. On the sort of shuttle front, we've had just really impressive successes in this area, in large part due to town administrators and boards of selectmen on improving the shuttle service, including the connected service through many towns like Acton, Boxborough, Maynard, and Littleton. The town of Acton just received a grant from Mass DOT to buy a new van and to improve its dispatch service. So I know that all the town administrators and board of selectmen are always looking out for new opportunities for state funding. Please keep us apprised if you're applying for those grants, and we can advocate for them, because the town of Acton just received a pretty sizable grant to improve its shuttle service. On the healthcare cost containment front, the Senate has had this fairly robust working group, and would love to hear any ideas on cost containment. I will say, as someone, and Representative Benson and I just had a forum out in Ayer on this, on single-payer healthcare, on really reforming the system from a more comprehensive perspective. And I know that there are a fair amount of folks that are looking at, what would be the cost savings at the municipality level if we had a single-payer system. So that's certainly something that I know a lot of my constituents have been discussing, is, I think sometimes there's a perspective on healthcare savings from a consumer point of view, from a business point of view, but, let's not forget, what could be the savings or benefits or concerns from municipal government point of view on that. And then the last thing I would just highlight is that I am fairly advocate on housing and zoning reform. I filed a number of bills around zoning reform. I completely acknowledge that's a sensitive issue, especially amongst a lot of small towns. The Senate did pass a zoning reform bill last session, and we do want to be sensitive to the small towns. We also want to make sure that every community is doing its part on affordable housing. I'm particularly impressed, since we're here in Stow. Stow's done a very good job on building more affordable housing. I know there's a couple projects going forward now. But I think clearly there is a discussion that there needs to be more done by all communities to build more affordable housing from an economic development perspective, and from perspective of making sure the people that grow up in this area, the kids of elected officials and administrators here in this room, can be able to afford and to live in the home communities that they grew up in. So I am hopeful we can pass something on zoning reform. And to that point, there is a housing bond bill that will be passed this session. Every 5 years, the legislature passes a bond bill. So the bonding committee just reported out a $1.7 billion housing bond bill yesterday, I believe, or the day before. And that's for everything from public housing authorities to building more affordable housing, to some of the tax credits that allows housing trusts or community development corporations to leverage private investments to build more affordable housing. So that's something that certainly want to make sure that every community gets their fair share of that bond bill once it passes into law, and that's a 5-year bond bill that will pass at some point this session. And I guess the final thing I'll just say is that the legislature did have a hearing this week on climate change. And I filed a bill on 100% renewable energy, which has gotten a fair amount of attention. Cities and towns in Massachusetts have really led on climate change, and very proud that I think in the 14 communities I represent, 11 of the 14 are green communities. But certainly we need to do more, and one of the discussions is cities and towns sort of taking the lead on moving to 100% renewable energy. So look forward to that discussion. Any other questions? And thanks very much, Victoria and MMA, for having me this morning. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to start this brief discussion of the issues and the projects that I care about by saying there is a lot of challenges out there right now coming from Washington. We talk about healthcare on this level in degrees. And I just want to say that if we understand that, then we also understand that with Washington talking about taking away Obamacare as we move into the future, those degrees are increased to the point of it being impossible for us to do our job in providing health care to our constituents and to Massachusetts residents. So I would like to say thank you so much to everyone here, because really we are the ones that are getting the work done. We're getting it done on the legislative level. We're working in partnership with our governor, and we're working very closely with all of you. And that is what I trust in, and that is what I believe in when I get up every day to go to the legislature, that we are getting it done. And as we talk in degrees of what is necessary, what we agree about, and what we decide to do moving forward, it is our trust in each other and the ability to work together that is going to make all of that possible. And if you don't believe me, look at DC. One thing I would like to bring up that isn't on the agenda right now, but I did want to mention, is the 495 Metro West Suburban Edge Community Commission. I am sure you've heard about it. Basically, it was passed in the legislature in 2015, and we are looking at topics that include transportation, downtown revitalization, energy, education, telecommunications. This is all through a commission set up by the legislature that would also include members from the governor's council, members of the legislature, including Senator Eldridge and myself and Senator Spilka. And I know that all the other legislative members here will have a great deal to do with it moving forward. We're looking forward to a report coming out within the next few weeks that we will make available to all the communities along 495 to be able to look at what it means to bring transportation to this area. And I would say that that is the issue that comes up the most for all of our towns, is that the lack of transportation drives an increased need for getting folks moved around through town resources, and it is just very, very difficult to get folks moved around, and whether that is for workforce, whether that's around town, whether that's for our seniors, for our folks with disabilities, all of that becomes extremely expensive and difficult to really perform at any level. So we're really looking forward to this, working with the governor, working with the legislature, and working with all of you to make this report into a set of legislative priorities that will help to transform our area over time. The commission itself runs from Acton all the way down to Rentham, and it really wraps around the 495 corridor, and that is us, and we are only 26 miles west of Boston, and yes, we don't see the kinds of resources that have been placed in, say, gateway cities. Very important, but what I did was take the lesson from the gateway cities and say, how do we help our small towns? How do we help those towns that sit on the rivers that were all part of the Industrial Revolution and now need to revitalize and move into the 21st century? And I'm hoping that's what's going to happen from this commission. And I'd like to thank Jamie and all the other legislators here for making that possible. We all voted on it, and we continue to vote to support the commission as we move the work forward. The other piece that I would like to mention, which I thought is good news, so let me also mention that. The first half of September of this year did see an increase, a significant increase, 181 million, or a 14% increase from this period last year. And the thing that we're excited about is it's across all of the notes, whether it's sales, corporate, or income tax, they're all up. The thing that was confounding to us and continues to be confounding to us is that it's never one tax, never one source of revenue that's down in any given month. It's sort of spread across the panoply of revenues. And so to see them all up and all strong for the first half of September makes me confident, and also referring back to those overrides, that we can make those necessary overrides to the cuts that were made to the budget. Earmarks are sort of a term that's used for everything that legislators bring home to their districts, but my earmarks have to do with transportation and van service in and around the district. So it's certainly not taken lightly nor asked for lightly, and critically important, and yet those things can be taken out of your budget when cuts come. So we will all the legislators here will be working hard on those, and the ones that were made recently and the overrides that were made recently were really on all issues related to health care and public health, including palliative care, HIV services, and critically important issues that we deal with in the Commonwealth and the individuals that are most vulnerable, which we will always, always, always be dedicated to serving. So those are the issues that I'm working on right now, and look forward when the Edge Commission report comes out. I will most certainly make sure that that is shared around with all of you. I can send out with the minutes from this meeting a one-pager, so everybody's up to speed, and we'll certainly be sending out the report itself. And what I hope is that I can come to your district, come to your community to see how we can make it a better report. This is an initial draft, and finish it working with our legislators and be able to provide our area, our region, both an identity that we perhaps don't have right now, and a way to look at our economic development in a way that we don't have right now. So thank you very much.
Carmine, Gentile, 13th Middlesex District. It's a team effort in Massachusetts, and we all work very well together. Not only, I think all the representatives here today are Democrats, but we work well with our Republican colleagues, and it's a joy. One of the things that I've been working on is education, and in that area, I think some of us, maybe most of us, realize that our school start times for high school kids and junior high kids, for most of our schools and most of our communities, they're starting at 7:30 in the morning. Some get to school 7 o'clock in the morning, the high school kids. But the research has been out there for over 20 years to say that adolescents need that extra hour of sleep, and they do so much better in school. They're not falling asleep in class. They're not having an accident on the way to school. So there's a movement to move all our high school, middle school start times to 8:30. Already five or six communities have done this, but for the other 340 plus communities or school districts in the Commonwealth to do this, it will require state action. So we have legislation for the legislature to put together a commission to look at this and make recommendations on legislation. And if we're able to be successful in that area, the RAND Corporation came out with a comprehensive national study that shows that there will be a $9 billion per year benefit to the country if the whole country gets into this, because of the increased productivity of the greater learning of the children. It will be great. Their lifetime incomes will increase. The medical costs will decrease, the medical costs of them having accidents on the way driving to school. So that's just one thing that has my attention. Another thing that has my attention is that the high cost of college education. I mean, when my parents went to college, they didn't, but my mother-in-law went to college, it cost about $50 or $100 a semester. When I went to college, go to a good school for maybe $3,000 a year. That could all be paid back in a few years, 5 or 6 years. Now kids are coming out of college and they're owing, we read in the paper, the average student is owing about $40,000 or $35,000. I know one student came out owing $160,000 for a bachelor's degree. And the graduate schools, some of our graduate schools, the the cost of a year is $90,000 or more. So while the high school degree was needed, you needed a high school degree 40 years ago. It would be good if you went to college, but you needed that high school degree. Now people need secondary education. Now people need post-secondary education. They need to go to university. If you want to be a plumber or a carpenter, that's great, but you need something beyond the high school, and for most of us, it's college. So I've filed legislation for the public higher ed in the Commonwealth to be free. Absolutely free of no tuition, no fees. Well, that's pie in the sky, but New York has already moved there. They've moved there so that people earning with household incomes of less than $100,000 would go free, and that's sort of the last dollar way of looking at things. And actually, I've been looking at it to be just free, period, just the way our public high schools are free, because we need to move there. We don't want our children to be coming out of university and owing as much as we would for a mortgage. On healthcare, we don't know what Washington is going to do, and so we can't. Only our congressmen and senators in Washington can have any effect on that, and hopefully it won't devastate the system that we have. I mean, we hear about the current bill that they're looking at would deprive the Commonwealth of several $1 billion in health care aid. But let me bring things closer to home on transportation. So from South Acton, we can go into North Station, and for 7 years, my wife would go to, and sometimes I would go to South Acton, I still do, and go into the North Station. But if you're from Brockton or Plymouth, you come to South Station, you can't connect. So there's been an effort for many years to link the North Station and South Station. When we had the big dig, that was actually part of it, but the Reagan administration took it out. There's currently an effort to look at putting that together, and our time is limited. So I'm working with others on trying to connect the North Station and South Station underground. The cost is about half of what it would have been years ago because of the change in technology. On housing, just want to briefly talk about housing. We need about 70,000 or 80,000 new units in the next few years in the Boston area and in Boston itself, and right now we're falling 20 or 30 housing units short, so we're trying to see how we can make up for that, because housing is so expensive, as everybody in this room knows, that if we're going to continue to have new industry, new businesses come into the Commonwealth, workers need a place to live that they can afford. And so we continue to work on that. Next year, there will be a number of ballot questions. One of the ballot questions is the so-called Millionaire's tax, and that will very much affect people in two of the municipalities that I represent. It will affect people in almost in every community, but basically that would tax an extra 4% on any monies earned over the first 4%, over the first $1 million. And that would raise probably about somewhere between $1.5 to probably closer to $2 billion a year that would be used exclusively for education and transportation. And we have a $6 billion or more backlog on infrastructure within 128 that needs to be done just for the MBTA. On the education front, probably 20% of that amount would finance free higher ed in the Commonwealth. I've already spoken too long, and I apologize. But it's wonderful to see you all today, and thank you.
All right, I have a 20-minute PowerPoint. Good morning. I'm very thrilled to be here and thrilled to be in Stow, and even though it's not in my district, maybe it's my 7th or 8th favorite town. So I'm very happy to be here. So to give you a quick update on what I've been doing, I recently changed committees. I'm now chair of the State Administration and Regulatory Oversight Committee, and part of that is also to sit on the Open Meeting Law Commission with the Attorney General's office. So we have regular meetings where we discuss how the open meeting law is working or not working, and we will be writing a report saying, if there should be updates or different interpretations of that law. So having been a local elected official and a school committee member and chair, I understand the importance and the difficulties around the open meeting law. And I know this is something that, say my name? Oh, I'm Jen Benson. Thank you. So anyway, it's not about me, it's about the work, people. No. So it's all about me. But the open meeting law, I know, is really, is something you all struggle with, and really trying to update it and get it into the 21st century is sort of my goal. And through that, hopefully making it a little bit easier for you to deal with and a little bit cheaper for you to deal with. Now, we also have a member of the press on the commission, and of course, we're arguing about postings and different things and how to streamline that, and he and I have some differing opinions on that. But moving forward, I appreciate your input. So any input you have around the open meeting law, send it to me. I'm happy to bring that to the meeting so it can be discussed. Additionally, in my committee, I'm dealing with everything from land transfers to basic functioning of government. And we're, at this point in the session, we still have 230 bills that haven't had hearings yet, so we are kind of pedal to the metal moving forward. That's the joy of getting a committee halfway through the session. So we've been working hard on that. As far as legislation that I have filed about 32 pieces of legislation dealing primarily in healthcare, some education, senior care, and financial stability and environment. So I'll just highlight a few. One is a healthcare bill that has actually gotten a lot of attention, addressing step therapy protocols in health plans. And so the goal of the bill is to make sure that the medication your doctor prescribes for your certain ailment is the medication you will have access to if they believe this is the best medication for you, whether or not it is covered as a first-tier medication by your health insurance provider. So what we've been seeing is people being delayed unnecessarily for their best treatment for them, and these delays can cause serious ramifications. A progression of disease that is then more expensive to treat. And so if we're looking at healthcare costs, which we are all talking about, and Representative Hogan brought up, one of the best ways to reduce costs is to increase health. I mean, it's sort of silly, but it's true. So if we can make sure that people get the therapies they need as soon as they can get them, when the doctor prescribes them, we're then hopefully limiting the overall cost of that ailment. So that is an example of some of the legislation I filed. I also, next week, I have a hearing on my no-fee credit freeze bill that I filed with the Attorney General. This is, especially now, I think the current news shows how important this is. And so we're really pushing this bill moving forward, and I know a lot of people in the Commonwealth are energized around it. Speaking of energy, I have filed a couple pieces of environmental and energy infrastructure legislation. One is grid modernization, which is very technical and people don't really like to talk about it. But what it does is make sure that not only do we have a resilient and modern grid, but we also look at more local distributed generation rather than big transmission lines. And so we know the utility providers make a much larger return on investment on building large transmission.
But, you know, what we are trying to say in this legislation and directing the DPU is let's prioritize local generation. So this is a great thing if you are looking as in your towns in creating solar fields and that sort of thing. So it really tries to increase the mix of renewable energy in the overall system. And the second bill I'll highlight is I filed a carbon pricing bill for Massachusetts. And this bill is gaining a lot of momentum, and it's supported by Republicans and Democrats, both on a national level and in Massachusetts. And it's a way of sort of building on the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative with the cap and trade system that puts a price on carbon, but we're looking at putting a price on the other areas of carbon-based fuels. So it would exempt the electrical sector. I'm thrilled to say that the Baker administration is now looking at this as a possibility for addressing the transportation sector, which is our largest emissions sector. So I think we're moving in a good direction. I'm working with 8 other states in maybe trying to do this in a regional way, and the state of Washington, Oregon, and California. So, you know, I'm excited about this. I think this is really a national movement. British Columbia has been doing this since 2008. And unlike a tax, which can depress the economy, this actually dramatically increases economic investment, and their entire economy has grown both jobs and revenue. So I'm really excited about this as sort of the new and better way to approach carbon emissions. So with that, I will turn it over to whomever is next. Oh, Susan is here from Hank's office. Did you want to give a quick?
Not at this time.
No, okay.
Thank you so much to our legislators who are here today for those updates, and also thank you to the legislative staff that has come.